Hello and welcome to the podcast of the Prison Officers Association, the UK's largest professional union for prison, correctional and secure psychiatric workers with 33,000 members. In this episode, we talk to NEC member Ian Carson about the vexed subject of regime management planning, or RMP. Since the national agreement was signed in 2017, the concept has been the cornerstone of the union's efforts to make sure that prisons are as safe as possible, both for those incarcerated and those who work in them. Ian's unrivaled expertise in this area mean that his views and analysis are widely sought after and will be of interest to any listener who's had to engage in any way with an RMP or the risk assessment that underpins it. Ian Carson, NEC member, thank you very much indeed for joining us for this podcast on regime management planning. I understand that this is something that you have a lot of expertise in and spend quite a lot of time talking about.
Well, some background possibly be the best place to start to answer the question. In 2015, the prison service, along with the trade union, realised that following on from benchmarking, when we lost an awful lot of staff, we'd lost our way. And we were trying to do the work that we were given with staff pre-benchmark with what we were left post-benchmark. It simply wasn't possible. And we were told as a trade union and as a staffing group, adopt new ways of working. That's what we need to do. Actually, nobody said or told us what new ways of working were, which isn't unusual, but there we go. That's what we were left with. And so what we did is we sat down with the employer in 2015 to actually look at what new ways of working actually meant. And what it meant was doing things differently because we had less staff, and doing things differently in a safe manner because things had become less and less safe in the years between when we finished benchmarking and when we started this work. And I think really important for me to say here that between 2015 when we started that work, 2017 when I signed this document off on behalf of the NEC, we ended up with version 9, which might show you the amount of work that the executive put into producing this document. And so we ended up with version 9 of the RMP, which we believe is the policy by which everybody should be working inside a prison. And we've got a prison service order that supports that. Everybody must have an RMP. It must be compliant because it's a health and safety document to account for when you don't have all the staff that you should have to deliver the work you've been given.
But what is the reality of the position in prisons today?
Well, it's really interesting because during the pandemic, which wasn't that long ago, we put forward a suggestion that anywhere up to 70% of prisons didn't have an RMP. One of their specialists came back and said, actually, the figure's closer to 90%. And there are a number of reasons for that. But I believe today, as we sit here, the majority of prisons do not have a policy-compliant RMP.
The concern that I'm sure many people listening to this will immediately raise is that the RMP is in fact a protection. And if it's got more holes than Swiss cheese, as they say, that means the potential for people to be exposed to unsafe working conditions and unsafe practices in the workplace is greater than it needs to be and greater than it should be. How can branches and individuals do their best to ensure that not only there is an RMP, but it's adhered to and it's properly founded on an accurate and comprehensive risk assessment?
Well, that starts with every individual member. So every individual member should be able to walk on any unit anywhere in the country and understand that on that unit, there should be 6 staff. But today we've only got 5. So there should be a written instruction available to them about how they then adopt their working practices because they've got a fairly large reduction in the resource that they should have. And that should be written down, it's prescribed, and that becomes their new risk assessment and safe system of work for working with a reduced number of staff. And that is common to every prison in the country. You should be able to walk into any jail anywhere, whether you're on detached duty or you've been loaned or if you've been transferred prison, you should be able to ask the question, can I see the risk assessment for the unit that RMP, the part of the RMP for that unit should be written there, whether it be on the computer or whether it be a paper copy on the unit. So every member of staff should be able to see that today we've got a number of staff missing and this is what we do differently.
So in reality, the RMP is open to review, will be reviewed and adjusted every time there is a departure from what the RMP says, to take into account what those changes may be. And if the union is going to go in and say, we think there's a problem here, then it needs to do so on the basis of evidence. And that's where the risk assessment and the role of each individual member comes in.
Yeah. So the members communicate that to the branch officials. That's how this should work. That they've got some concerns, that they're not able to find the risk assessment, that they don't fully understand it, or even if they believe it needs to be changed and reviewed. And we built into the original document that this should be reviewed every year anyway. That's for the NEC. But every time you do a piece of work around your regime, so for example, a reprofile, that RMP should be reviewed. It should be reviewed in light of any changes that you make, so that them changes can then be put into your regime management plan and accommodated. I'm not sure that works either, to be quite honest.
Is the problem, are the instances where it doesn't work, how much of that is due to management not understanding the process or their obligations under it?
80% at least. I have a number of friends that I've served with over the years that are now managers that will quite happily ring me or text me or email me and say, look, this is a complete mess. I'm not going to mention the prison, but I've had that communication recently from a friend who's on loan to another prison who says, this is just a complete mess. We need to sort it out, redo it. And of course, the NEC stand ready to do all of that. But when you've got local officials that maybe struggle to understand where their support mechanism is or how that works, it's very, very simple. You get in touch with your local area representative and you say, this RMP is a mess, we need it redoing. And we can start from the very beginning and build it back up again, or we can just intervene and amend small areas of the regime management. Sometimes we go in and do workshops for SMTs, for management teams, to show them where their obligations are and what they can do to manage that regime management plan effectively. And I've done a number of them. But that work continues.
But really, there shouldn't be a pushback, should there, from management at either local or a national level, because all this sits under the auspices of a national agreement, the 2015-2017 agreement, and therefore there should only be a positive reaction if concerns are raised under this procedure. Yeah,
well, a number of rumours grew up around the RMP when it was introduced. I firmly believe that some people looked at it and went, it's too complicated, let's just find excuses to stick it on the back shelf. Some people clearly did that. Actually, when you look at it, it's very simple. When you build a regime management plan, you take all the work in the prison and you map it into the RMP. So that the work, which is being designed by the governor, because of the budget they've been given, is actually simply placed into an RMP. So none of that process undermines any governor anywhere in the country. What it does is it makes them accountable, and that's the bit that some people don't like. And there are flexibilities built into it. It's not like we can't move things around. We have a number of other pieces of work bolted onto this, and one of them is the planning meeting, where branch officials can go and sort out, to make sure that the thing's working properly. But the managers can communicate change. So if you're a prisoner, being told tomorrow that things have changed isn't good. But if you're told that things are going to change in 2 weeks' time, which is what this meeting does, it's far more palatable, far more easy to get your head around, and it's far easier for staff. So that part of this piece of work builds on your dynamic security, improves relationships. It takes the pressure out of, the other things that are going wrong inside prisons. It's all good, but actually, if you look at it as a whole, it can seem quite complex. And if you don't fully understand it, then the easiest thing to do is put it on the back shelf and just say it doesn't work.
With respect, and I disagree with you slightly, because that's probably the most dangerous thing that can happen, isn't
absolutely.
it? A very short-term fix, almost forgetting how dangerous workplaces prisons are.
Yeah, well, I think if you, I made a note earlier of what it says on Mr. Google about regime management planning, because they're not the words of the trade union, they're the words of the prison service, and it says it's about allocating resources to safely manage the prison. That's basically what it means. So who wouldn't want to safely manage a prison?
For sure.
Who wouldn't want to be able to be absolutely transparent in the use of what resources they've got? I find it rather interesting every time people from the civil service are asked to do something to change. Senior managers almost automatically go and knock on the door and ask for more resources. The majority of them don't understand what they've got at the moment, and they don't know how to use them correctly. I mean, I don't want to give the impression that this is an easy piece of work to put together, because it's not. But actually, the NEC are well versed in getting in and supporting people, whether they be managers or local officials, to get this document in the right place, and then to manage it locally so that you're running it correctly. But that's not happening at the moment. We know it's not happening through the figures that we shared during the pandemic. And it's quite common for me. I'll walk into a prison and I'll ask them what regime state they're in. There are 4 regime states in the RMP, how you divide the work up: red, amber, and green. So when you're in the red state, you've got very few staff. When you're in the top of the green state, you've got all your staff. So when I walk into prison, I normally say to the people in the gate, tell me what regime state you're in today. Very, very rarely do I get any form of answer. And then when I do get an answer, I go and check. That's not normally the state they're in. So people are confused. There's more support required. And when you look at the situation in the prison service at the moment, where violence is on the increase, this document was agreed as a cornerstone of a policy to deal with violence, chaos, pandemonium and mayhem inside prisons. And so for a lot of managers not to be saying, actually, we need this document, we need to be working to it, we need to communicate it, I find that quite disappointing. And it's certainly surprising. It's also very disappointing.
I suppose 2 things flow from not respecting, understanding, adhering to the RMP agreement. One is dangers go undetected and things get more dangerous rather than less dangerous. But the other thing is that real resource shortages, where you can't work any more smarter without getting more resources, stay hidden. They're not evidenced. They're not surfaced, and that then becomes a vicious cycle.
So that takes you back to your average core day. When somebody like HMIP comes into prison, they base their findings on you having everything you should have. I don't know anywhere in the country that's got all the staff and resources should have. So then when you look at then what you're able to deliver with what you've got available, then you've got a far better opportunity to judge whether or not the prison's actually efficient and running safely. This document, this regime management plan, is a health and safety document. It's about whether you've got the right amount of staff to do a piece of work. And if you don't, what you're going to do differently, which doesn't mean you can't do the work. It just means that you're going to do it in a different way. It might mean that it's going to take you longer. A piece of work that takes 3 staff might take an hour. If you've only got 2, it might now take an hour and a half. That's up to individual jails to work out and write into their own regime management plan. There are 3 annexes: the Annex A, the Annex B, the Annex C. The most important document in the whole package is the Annex B, because that's the bit that tells you and I, who've been posted into HMP Wandsworth tomorrow, and we've never been there before, and we're going on to A-Wing. The Annex B for A-Wing tells us exactly what we're expected to do, how many staff we should have, and because we won't have everything we should have, and that's commonplace, what we do differently to make life safe for ourselves and the people we look after.
It must be infuriating, though, for you and colleagues on the NEC that actually, okay, it's not an easy task, but it is one where there is a lot of support and the pathways through it are well marked, and the costs and consequences of not doing it are so immense that actually any time spent on this is obviously an investment rather than a burden.
Absolutely correct. I believe there's a link to suicide and self-harm in prisons. I really do. I can't provide you any evidence to support that, But we know the amount of prisoners that have got mental health problems, that have got different mental health conditions, ADHD, autism. And when you read the kind of impact living in a chaotic environment has on those people, you think, well, how can we reduce some of that chaos? How can we eradicate some of that? Can we take some of that away and make life better for them? Of course, if you make life better for the people we look after, naturally that improves the workplace for us.
Yeah.
And so there is a great requirement for people to actually look at this and in a way that, yes, it reduces risk, yes, it allocates resources, but actually we're going to have a wider impact on people. I know, having worked in the prison service for all these years, that you don't go and tell a prisoner bad news that's going to happen tomorrow if you can possibly avoid it. If you go and tell a prisoner today in today's prison system that actually in 3 weeks' time, young Johnny, because we're forecast not to have as many staff, we're going to close down and do some training, and therefore your access to the gym will be limited, that prisoner will probably say, well, I'm not very happy with that, Mr. Carson, but anyway, it's 3 weeks away, so I'm sure you'll remind me beforehand. When I then go up to him a week before and the day before, you get a different reaction than if I just go and tell him that tomorrow he's not going to the gym. And that part of that work is set within the processes that bring you an RMP.
It strikes me, Ian, that the union role in all this is, as it is with most things, is absolutely vital, because it's the union through its members and its local reps that will know exactly what's going on the wings in a way that management probably can't. What happens if there are the usual discussions between the union management, and yet there is no agreement at the end? Is there any kind of escalation route? Or is it just a question of the union having to sit back and watch management make the mistakes they've warned them about? What can be done?
So what we do is we use the disputes policy. PSO 8525 is the document where we engage with managers, where we set out our concerns and where we try and seek some resolution. The RMP has written within it the requirement to create an engagement or a consultation log. So any branch official wants to go and see their governor today and say, Governor, we're not keen that we've actually got an RMP that works, that's fit for purpose. We want to do something about it. So let's call in some support. There's plenty of support there. Let's sit down. Let's talk through what we need. Let's communicate that, and let's go and seek the support we need. That should all be written into that consultation log, because the governor might say no. Let's say that a prison governor might say, well, I'm happy with what I've got. I would expect that branch to go into dispute and then show us the consultation log that shows that they've been actively trying to seek, change or compliance with the policy that we've agreed to. If every branch in the country did that, who didn't have a compliant RMP, then I would be far happier than I am sat here today, because I know lots of branches are struggling. I'm going to annual conference next month, and I've got no doubt I'll be approached at conference by branches who will say to me, look, we're struggling. We need some help. Go into dispute. That would be my advice. If your governor isn't keen, get yourself through the consultation process, end up in dispute, and let's get people in to help you get the policy that we've agreed to. This policy, when we wrote it, we got rid of most of the shoulds and mights. There are very few. If you read the policy, Jackie Marshall and I, when we wrote this on behalf of the NEC, we went to great pains to get rid of the shoulds and the mights. It's all musts and wills in this document. There's very little room for manoeuvre outside of what we've given you. So that's a message I would pass to branch officials. Go in, bang the desk, tell your governor you want a policy compliant RMP, or you're going into dispute.
And if you had a magic wand and you could wave it over the RMP and all the consequences and details of it, what one thing do you think would make most difference? Is it knowledge of the procedure? Is it to have 100% resourcing levels? Is it something else?
I would say that an understanding of your average core day for every branch official, what that means. so that you would then be better armed. You'd have all the information you need to go and have the right argument. That's as well as that document, understanding what that number is, because once you've got an idea that actually you're not going to have 100, your average day will be 80, you can build your arguments as a branch official around. You can walk into Durham tomorrow knowing that 87 staff were in the day before and start asking the question why, because you know that there's going to be 73 in on another day, and that's going to be a bad day. And you don't want to be in prison on a bad day, because that's when you get lots of reaction from prisoners, because you're not delivering everything they're expecting.
And it's not a question of, in engaging on that basis, accepting that a lower than published headcount is acceptable in any way. It's a question about making sure that people are safe.
Yeah, well, we live in a real world, don't we? So we know things like, and I call it the unfunded pressure. We have a thing called a non-effective with prisons, which is funded. But the unfunded pressures are the bits that drive that staffing number down: maternity leave, special leave, disability leave. All of the other reasons staff won't be there. And so we have to live in the real world, to go back to one of the original points I made. Hope is not the strategy by which you run a prison. And I've actually had a load of kickback, I remember speaking to a governor one day who said, "Come on, Ian, tell us how we do this then." I said, "Well, okay, let's start with your sick." "Well, I have far more sick than I get paid for." I said, "How many?" Blank. And I give him 5 seconds, and I said, "You don't know." So we're now talking about something that I can tell you you've got a problem with, that you don't know what it is. I said, so take your sick from last year. You'll know what the additional number is for every day on average. You've got a plan for that, because it isn't going to change this year. And the same will go for maternity leave, and the same will go for additional training requirements. And then you can come up with a figure that gives you a better chance of simply not accepting the challenge, to be able to go and define what that means. And actually, if you walk in from outside, come from outside a prison, and say, tell us why you're not delivering all this other work. The prison governors they'll just say, well, we've got these other pressures. They won't really know what it means. If you said to them, okay, we know you've got sick over and above what you get paid for, how many is it? I don't think governors in my area would be able to respond to it, because I've had that conversation with many of them, but many wouldn't. So you're working with something that you don't fully understand. The only reason you don't is because you haven't been and had a look at it.
And yet it's there to be seen.
There to be seen.
Wow. Ian, thank you very much indeed. That's been absolutely fascinating. Is there any other points you wanted to make that we haven't made during our discussion?
I don't think so. But the shortest, I run workshops from 2 days, 3 hours, 5 hours. It all depends on exactly what people are asking for. And to do that, I'm talking to people that should have an understanding of all of the nuances. You don't work for the prison service, so I'm probably using terms and terminology and phrases that you won't be used to. And if you get an idea that that's the kind of time that we need to put this right, the podcast will, hopefully, we've touched on all of that. Yeah. And one last thing before you go. This is the future for new staff. There is no alternative. When I came into the prison service all them thousands of years ago, we were actually quite good at working safely, and we had quite a lot of staff. The future of the service, if you're a young person in today's prison service, you cannot possibly think you're going to cope for decades in a chaotic environment that's full of violence and pandemonium and mayhem. And this document actually gives you the opportunity to get a grip of a lot of that. You're never going to eradicate it all, but actually that RMP with the other bits that bolt onto it give you a chance to eradicate a lot of it, so that if you want a career in the service, your mental health won't be, this will aid in your long-term health, because you'll be working in a fairly safe environment with some very, very dangerous individuals. Without this, God knows where the service is going to be in 10 years' time.
My thanks to Ian. If you want to find out more about the union's work on RMP, risk assessments, health and safety, or any area of concern to union members, visit the union's website at poauk.org.uk, where there is also information on how to join the union should you not already be a member. Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed what you have heard and will join us for the next episode of the POA podcast. Thank you and goodbye.